Howdy. Slightly more composed and I guess you could say professional Nick tonight, in that I'm actually using the back camera because I keep getting distracted by the front camera. So yeah, let's talk about what's changed since yesterday first, seeing as I'm living history now in more ways than one. So since I spoke with you last, the confirmed amount. Alright, I touched the screen, I just wanted to make sure I didn't stop the recording. The amount of people killed yesterday has gone from 1 to, I believe, 5. It was 4 earlier. I've heard about one more passing. One that should make people mad, as should make the people that did this mad. I don't know about the other 3, but aside from the woman who was shot yesterday, while trying to get in, today a Capitol policeman was taken off life support after he was declared brain dead, I believe, because one of the terrorists, and that's what I'm going to continue to call them, hit him in the head with a fire extinguisher. Yeah, what I'm sorry, so-called Trump Republicans. I'm sorry, Trump worshippers. What happened to worshipping our cops? Thought you stood for the boys in blue. Thought blue lives mattered. I guess not when they're in your way. It's utterly sickening how this is being treated by right-wing outlets. And I don't know how confirmed this is, although I don't know how they would have faked it, but I've seen footage of not only Capitol Police removing barricades to allow the mob in, but even stopping to pose for selfies with certain members of the mob. The second one for sure happened inside the building. That's the footage I saw. I saw video footage of a Capitol City Guard, full uniform, mask, visibility, high-vis jacket, stopping and taking a picture with one of the terrorists. But so they were inside. I was going to say I don't know if they were violent yet, but they were inside the building and they had to break windows to do that. So obviously it was after it got violent. So not only does it look like certain members, I will not say the Guard as a whole, because I'm pretty sure the majority of them were inside protecting the congressmen and women and their aides and anyone else that was inside the building, but seems like that whole few bad apples goes all the way to the top, doesn't it? Now, I know what you're thinking. I'm too white to sound this cynical. But it's disgusting. Because had that been a Black Lives Matter protest, or had that started as one, and don't get me wrong, if it had been that and they had done the same thing, they would still be terrorists. But bottom line is, if that was a bunch of black people, they'd all be dead or in jail. There would not have been orders. There would have been orders to shoot on sight the second one of them gets in the building. But as we have it, there were, middle-aged white men in the Capitol City building, armed with weapons and home-fashioned pipe bombs, according to some reporting. Again, don't take everything I say as gospel. I'm still piecing everything together myself. Getting news when I can. But I'm pretty sure it was confirmed from a few different locations that there were makeshift explosives placed in multiple areas and several different places on the grounds. I think one was found I think 2 were found on the grounds of the Capitol building, and if I'm not mistaken, the third one was found near Mayor Bowser's mansion, who, let me just say, has a fantastic name. God bless you, Mayor Bowser. You are a wonderful woman. Truly. But yeah, if that had been black people, they'd have been shot a block away from the. They would forget getting in the building. They would have been shot a block away. They would have been shot 4 blocks away. They would have been shot as they left the rally. And white people would be defending that. That's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. That's not virtue signaling or whatever garbage people want to call it. Those are just facts. We've seen that in action across the country. Those are just facts. But it's also come out that one of the reasons it took so long to retake control of the building is it would seem that Trump was working hard to delay the deployment of the National Guard. 2 hours after the first protesters breached the building, from their safe place inside the building, I don't remember which one it was, but one of the senators, or either one of the senators or one of the aides tweeted out that they had made a request to mobilize the National Guard, and it had been denied. It didn't say on whose authority, but it just said it had been denied. And hours after that, I don't remember how many, when they finally did say that they had gotten authorization to mobilize the National Guard, it was authorized by Mike Pence, Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, and I can't remember who it was. I can't remember who all it was approved by, but it was several names, and none of them were Trump. None of them. This was about an hour and a half after his half-assed attempt to, not even attempt, after he got on Twitter and fanned the flames instead of telling them to get lost. Doing my best not to say awful words. And then today, he releases a pre-recorded video because obviously his handlers have him on a tight leash. I think that has to be what it is. He delivered a strained remark, and I say strained because the look on his face and his body language gave me the same vibes as those POW videos where they're forced to sit in front of a camera at gunpoint. You don't get to see the gun most of the time and record messages to send out. It looked like he was being held hostage by the other people in the room, and if he said one word that was not off the teleprompter, they were going to open fire. That's how strained he looked delivering this arguably calm message. And I say arguably calm because it was still nicely laced with the same damn lies that he's been telling all along. The same damn lies that started all of this mess. And worse, he said them while kind of sounding like, if you didn't know the situation, you'd think he might actually sound like a president for once. He lied about deploying the National Guard immediately. He said immediately the rioters, the domestic terrorists, breached the Capitol building. I keep saying Capitol building, Congress, the Congress building, at around 1 o'clock, and I believe it was nearly 6 before the National Guard was mobilized, and it was 8 o'clock, I think it was a little past 8 o'clock, when the House and the Senate were able to resume normal activity. So, yeah, about that immediate deployment, that was a lie. He claimed that this whole mess was to maintain the integrity of our elections, when all he's done for 2 months, all he's done for 4 years, is talk trash about our election system. And look, I don't like it either. I don't like the Electoral College. I think one person, one vote. We have the technology to do it. It's an antiquated system that frankly was devised to keep so slave states could keep power, but we won't talk about that here. Bottom line is, it was developed in a time where it was hard to count every single vote and transmit that that information efficiently. Now you can do it in seconds. There's no excuse anymore. One person, one vote. That's the way it should be. If that's the way it was, we never would have had Trump as a president. Because despite the fact that he spent the past 4 years lying that he won the popular vote, he did not. He lost it by like 2 points, I think. And here we are 4 years later with Joe Biden leading him not only in the popular vote by several 100 million votes, I think. It was no small amount of votes, and the exact same difference in the Electoral College. It was the exact same margin that Trump called a landslide 4 years ago. But no, those results don't count because I don't like them. And that goes for Ted Cruz as well. And there's a senator from Pennsylvania whose name I refuse to know. I've just known Ted Cruz's for a while. Well, there's a senator from Pennsylvania doing the same thing. There's actually a picture of him giving the old fist salute in solidation with the group outside the White House before walking in. Not White House, Congress building before walking in. Just hours before they started breaking windows. Yeah. Why? Because they want that. They're planning to run in 4 years, and they want that support. And they still want it now. As a matter of fact, while they were in hiding, while they were in a safe place, hiding from these domestic terrorists, both Ted Cruz and this other man, again, whose name I refuse to learn, because he doesn't deserve the respect of me learning his name, sent out fundraising information for their 2024 presidential bids. Hey, donate here for our campaign in 4 years. You know, while I'm hiding from domestic terrorists who are only here because I propagated the lies put forth by the president. Money, please. So Ted Cruz can go to hell. I don't know if you can impeach members of the Senate. I'm sure we can remove them from power. So he deserves to be arrested. Every single person who's coddled Trump these past 4 years deserves to sit in jail. They really do. All of these people who didn't have a spine to stand up to the man who was constantly breaking the law, just because he could post a mean tweet about them and ruin their careers, because God forbid the foundation of... And look, I could honestly care less about the government, except they keep everything running right. So basically, they're trying to destroy the foundation of what they're trying to... It's like building a house while also digging a tunnel under where you're building your house. They're pulling the foundation out from where they're trying to build their own little empire, destroying what it's being built on. And they want to wonder, when it all falls apart, what happened. It's like building a wall, and when you get so high and run out of bricks, you just start using the bricks you started to build the wall, and you just move them to the top. And then say, well, this is my wall now. I built this. All this down here is trash. Some people I don't like built this. Or people I pretend to like because they supposedly deserve respect. Like, these are public servants. The president works for us. And we proved that when we fired him in November. We went to the polls and we fired him because he was doing a shit job. He only cared about himself. He only cared about what made him look good. And I want to reiterate, this is the same man who who ordered tear gas, pepper bullets, whatever Bill Barr wants to call them this week, into peaceful protesters to clear them out of Lafayette Square so he could walk across the street and get his picture taken while holding a Bible upside down. My eyes twitching. I am, to quote more or less Stephen Colbert, and several other people actually have echoed the same sentiment. I am disgusted. I am enraged. I am shocked, but I am not surprised. It's awful that it came to this, but I'd be lying if I sat here and said I didn't see it coming. In fact, I was so ready for this to happen that when I first read the headline, pro-Trump protesters breach Congress, or something like that, when they first started trying to get in, I just scrolled past it like, yeah, that sounds right. That sounds like something they'd do. And it wasn't until they had to evacuate the House and the Senate till somewhere safe that it actually set in. Wait a minute. This is a building that hasn't been breached since before we had independence. The last time it was breached was before we won our war of independence with Britain. So the first time since winning independence that the legislative branch of our government has been in immediate danger was under the orders of Donald Trump, not the eyes of him. It wasn't on his watch. It was on his orders. Because he's done nothing but pour fuel on this fire for years. And if you think I'm crazy, look back at Charlottesville. I'm pretty sure that was within the first year of his term. Very fine people on both sides. Very fine people on both sides. A woman died there. If I remember correctly, she was beaten to death by neo-Nazis and Klansmen. I think she was a white woman too. Very fine people on both sides. 5 people died as the results of the attack yesterday. While it was going on, Trump said he loved them and that they were very special. Sure, he put up a video today condemning it. But I guarantee you it was written for him, and I guarantee you he read it under duress. Or to save his own ass. But even I don't think he'd go that far under his own will. See, the thing is, there are calls from the Congress invoke the 25th Amendment, which basically is the amendment that lays out what happens if the president is incapacitated or otherwise unfit, or vice president. Well, the 4th section of it allows that if a majority of his cabinet and 2/3 of both the House and the Senate decide, they can immediately remove him from power and replace him with the vice president. couple of problems with that. One, you really think Pence is going to grow a conscience in the last 14 days? Sure, he kind of stood up to Trump yesterday by only letting Republicans dispute 5 states instead of the 10 they wanted to. But do you really think he's going to pick his balls back up now? He checked him at the door when he hopped on Trump's ticket, and we all know it. And for a man who claims to be a Christian, he's watched a lot of garbage go on right under his nose and hasn't said a damn thing. Not a thing. How do I know that? He's still employed. If at any point he had spoken up, Trump would have found a way to get rid of him. And Mitch McConnell's Republican Senate would have just watched. Yep, that sounds about right. I never liked him anyway. Old frog of a man. It's disgusting what happened yesterday, and even the action alone. And even if you just take the event in a bubble, it's terrible. But the implications that come from the fact that this was attacked from within. This was people that were supposed to be our people. They're not anymore, as far as I'm concerned. But they were, assumedly born and bred on this soil. They were not foreign attackers. They were not, they were not foreign attackers. They were extremists, right-wing extremists, for all of Fox News complaining that it's left-wing. They're still propagating that this is Antifa, a so-called deep state left-wing movement fueled by Democrats that pretends to be other things to subvert. This whole thing was born back from QAnon, back when the Black Lives Matter protests started. That apparently it was Antifa doing all of these bad things to make Republicans look bad. I'm going to stop harping on this. Even though it's, this is a video journal, and I am basically here to vent. Kind of the point. To vent and log the year, and boy fucking howdy if this ain't the big news of the year so far. At least since I've started doing this. And for 2021, we lasted all of 5 fucking days. I'm losing my composure, I'm sorry. Excuse me, 4 days, because a lot of this started back at Trump's rally the night before the runoff. And it continued, hell, probably even earlier than that. The tape between him and Roethlisberger, whatever his position is, I want to say Secretary of State, but don't hold me to that, where he was basically threatening Georgia officials, attempting to get them to overturn the results of our election. Flipping Georgia would have helped him. It wouldn't. If he convinced him to flip the runoff, then yeah, that would suck. But even if he did manage to flip the presidential results from Georgia, he'd still lose. And people have the audacity to be outraged that the tape was released. How dare he tape this thing and then release it later, when it's common practice for law holders to tape everything. That's not new. Especially considering there were lawyers present. You better believe they were cataloging everything. They're lawyers. That's their job. Because you do not want to, I've been watching a lot of Legal Eagle. Check him out, he's fun. He reported all of the crimes in Home Alone recently. It was great. But, you know, of course they're going to want hard copies of everything, and a recording counts. So of course it was recorded. And honestly, scarier to me is that we wouldn't have seen it except Trump was on Twitter lying about it, lying about how the call went. So the guy on the other end said, well, time to set the record straight and just release the whole thing. Then here, have it. This is the conversation. Not clips, not snippets, start to finish. Find in there where what he's saying is true. But you still got people talking about how the man had no business releasing the tape, despite that the tape shows Trump acting like a mafia thug. What are we gonna do, fellas? I just need X amount of votes. X being the exact amount of votes he would need to beat Joe Biden by exactly one vote. Telling them to find them. Say you recalculate it. Break the law because I don't like the result of this election. And he had the audacity to send out a video today saying all of these complaints and lawsuits and wastes of everyone's time were to protect the integrity of the election. This is a new level of political garbage. Politicians have always been guilty of some garbage. But this is just ridiculous. And it's like, I'm not even a true Democrat, honestly. I'm an independent. I wish Joe was being harder on certain things, but I also understand now's not the time for that. And it's, like I mentioned to someone else yesterday, there's a big difference between, I don't agree with all of our president's policies, and our president is literally on national television saying windmills cause cancer and that we should try nuking hurricanes. Are either ideal situations? No, but I'll take, I don't like some of these policies, but a lot of them are helping me over Trump insisting the hurricane went this way because that's the chart he was given. Yeah, remember that nonsense? When we argued for 3 days about the path of the hurricane that had been over for 3 days? And garbage like that is, like, I think an entire state went on alert, thinking it was coming their way when it wasn't. Thank God it wasn't the other way around. And people act like this is the thing that proved he was a monster. Where have you been for 4 years? Where were you when he was separating children from their families at the border to disincentivize immigration? Where were you then? Where were you when he was putting them in cages, packing them in like animals, calling them animals on national television at his rallies? Where were you when he insisted that we would only help one of our allies if they dug up dirt on his political opponents? Where were you when he humiliated himself by pushing himself to the front of like a major conference? I think it might have been NATO, or it was a huge summit full of many world leaders, and he like nearly knocked another man down trying to get to the front so he could be seen. Where were you where in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic he was touring the country and refusing to wear a mask because he didn't want to give the press the satisfaction of seeing him wearing one, while hundreds of people die today, every day, and it's only gone up. As a matter of fact, I think just last Tuesday was the deadliest day of the coronavirus yet. We didn't get. Why aren't we talking about that? Oh well, it was because a bunch of Trumpists stormed the Senate, broke into the Senate, attempted to hold democracy hostage. So, Trump claimed that we wouldn't hear anything about coronavirus after November 4th, that it was just that people were playing it up to make him look bad. Well, if you've heard less about it, it's only because he's been doing so much garbage since that day that somehow every day he reaches a new level of ridiculous that overshadows coronavirus somehow. That's how bad he is. That's how awful of a person he is. That's how awful of a president he pretends to be. So no, you didn't hear much about coronavirus yesterday because the Congress was under siege by middle-aged men in MAGA hats, toting fake flags. And I'm counting the Confederate flag among fake flags. I know that if anybody close to me and geographically is watching this, I know I just committed a sin. How dare I talk about our heritage like that? That's not our heritage. The Confederacy is as much a part of my heritage as these people will be a part of American heritage. Okay? That garbage they pulled yesterday, extend it over a couple of years and make it about owning people, being able to purchase and sell living human beings because they are black. And that's basically what the Civil War was. People like that, people that stormed the Capitol building yesterday, taking up arms because they wanted to keep owning slaves, and they wanted new states to own slaves so that if they decided to move to those new states that were just being founded, that they could take their slaves there. They wanted to be able to cross the border and retake slaves that had escaped. And at the time, Lincoln wasn't even trying to abolish slavery. He just wanted it to stop expanding, hoping it would die out. He wasn't near the radical people make him out to be. In fact, he was very reluctant, even though the South is the one that declared war, for clarification, if you didn't know that. You probably thought we didn't. You probably think we're a victim the whole way. Especially if you're from down here, but I'm sorry, I have news for you. It's that actual facts disprove that, and that's not just history being written by the victor. In fact, if Lincoln had his way, the war wouldn't have been about slavery. He didn't want it to be about slavery. He worked his hardest to make it not about slavery. But when the South started firing on a fort, he was forced to retaliate, and even still, he didn't make it about slavery. He didn't finally announce that the result of the war was going to be to abolish slavery until it was starting to look like other countries were going to intervene, and they weren't going to be on the north side for some reason. Possibly because a majority of the world was just as bad as the South back then. But once he said, this is officially a war to end slavery, the rest of the powers decided that was not something they wanted to touch. It's like when you hear your friends arguing and you kind of want to take sides, but then you find out they're just breaking up and they're arguing over who gets to keep the dog, and you're not touching that with a 10-foot pole. That's essentially what happened when Lincoln declared the war was about slavery, and that's why. Make no mistake, it was about it, but if he had his way, and if history was written by the victor, which it is in some circumstances, but not something on that scale, I don't think. Because something of that scale, documents from both sides are going to exist. But when you had the governor of South Carolina, you had the South hold their own election, elect their own president, and have him declare the war be about slavery. Slavery is the cornerstone of this confederacy, I believe. I don't know if I'm word for word on that, but that's essentially what he said. So that's very much what the war was about. And that's the same thing we almost saw start yesterday. If it weren't for the fact that there was, a relatively small amount of people as compared to the united force of the U.S. military, and they were not properly armed. Basically, if that had happened back before modern militarization, it probably would have been a full-scale civil war all over again. Fun fact, the right to bear arms was written into the Constitution so that in the case of the government becoming tyrannical, the citizens would be able to unite and oppose them. That's the reason it was written. Basically saying, if the experiment of democracy dies and America becomes a dictatorship, we want these people to have been able to arm themselves and rise up against that. That was the whole reason the right to bear arms was written. I'm sorry, you ain't pulling off a militia today. Maybe on a small scale, maybe you can capture a city for a little while. You're not going to overthrow the country's government with a couple of people. Unless you do it the way Trump was doing it, because he almost succeeded. And frankly, the scary thing is, if it weren't for coronavirus, I'm pretty sure he would have won. I'm pretty sure he'd still be president. If it weren't for coronavirus being the final straw for so many people, I don't know that he would have lost the election. And that's terrifying. I don't trust him the next 14 days. Can you imagine having to put up with him for 4 more years? Because if the numbers hadn't showed up to vote him out, they also wouldn't have barely scraped the Senate. In fact, we lost seats in the House. So there's a good chance we would have lost more, and we would have lost control of the House as well. And it would have been a completely red government doing whatever Trump wanted. Can you imagine? Anyway, I said I was going to stop like half an hour ago. So I'm actually going to stop now. This will be the last day of this. Hopefully as things go by, I will only really be... I was upset yesterday and I wanted to speak about it from a calmer mindset. Tomorrow, I'll probably just limit myself to new information. I haven't even talked about my day. And I did have a night of it. After recording... shortly after I recorded last night, a YouTuber, independent media person, independent journalist basically, that I follow, an independent reporter, Brian Tyler Conan, if you've heard of him, who does breaking news in a quick fashion. I like his format, because he basically just opens with footage of what he wants to talk about and then talks about it. So the first thing you get is not, he doesn't preface it, So he doesn't set it up. You get to absorb the information as it is and not have it taken out of context, because he doesn't give any, except for the title of the video. So basically, except for the headline. But aside from that, it's not like watching it on the news where you have a reporter set it up or give you context. You watch the thing and then he talks about it, and he's good at being factual. He's entertaining, honestly. He's not overtly, I don't want to say funny, but there's a realness to him that makes you like it, you know? You can tell he's as fed up by all of this as us sensible people, you know? You can tell he's a sensible person, and he's not afraid of using, sarcasm to take jabs, using the enemy. Oh, no, Trump is the enemy. Yeah, Trump is the enemy, specifically. And Republicans, anyone that supports him is, honestly. But after the actions of yesterday, if they don't jump ship, they're an enemy. They're allied with a terrorist group of people. I won't say organization, because it wasn't really organized. But they are officially the inciters of a riot, of an act of domestic terrorism. Because I didn't mention this yesterday because I hadn't seen it. They marched there straight from a Trump rally, where Trump encouraged them to march on the Congress building. And then Rudy Giuliani came out and riled them up more, calling for a trial by combat. He said if we lose, we'll be humiliated, but if we win, they'll all go to jail. So I call for a trial by combat. So I was going to quit talking. Anyway, yeah, yesterday, shortly after I wrapped this up and got it up, he went live with watching the certification of the electoral votes. I watched that for 8 hours for some reason, which was mostly 5 or 6 hours of Republicans arguing to overturn the results of Arizona and Pennsylvania with the most ridiculous, redundant arguments I have ever heard. This is unlawful. It was passed by Republicans. You didn't have a problem with it before the election. You didn't have a problem with it on election day. In fact, you didn't have a problem with it until your guy lost. It kind of tells me that you care for the wrong reasons and not because it's unconstitutional like you claim it is, which I'm not sure it is. But anyway, I watched that until it went off, 3:45. I actually did dishes while it was going on. During one of the points where we were having to wait for the Senate to file one way or the other. Because basically they'd come together in the House of Representatives, read off electoral votes. It's Pence would say, because he was the vice president, presided over it, he was like, hey yo, these are the results from Arizona. Are they good? A clerk would say, yeah, they're good. It's all here, and this is how it reads. Pence was like, alright, cool, anybody got a problem with that? And if no, they'd move on to the next one. And if yes, it would have to be signed by members of the House and a member of the Senate from that state, I believe. And in writing, as per Article so-and-so, an objection must be in writing and signed by both members of the House and a member of the Senate. Is the objection in writing and signed by a House and Senate member? And if it was, then the Senate would get up, go back to the Senate room, sit down, while the House and the Senate both argued about it. Both sides got an hour apiece, 5 minutes at a time, I believe. So 2 hours total, but not just 2 hours go, 2 hours, 5 minutes at a time. So Start speaking, that's 5 minutes. Start speaking, so you had like all that gap in the middle, filling it. Or like if they passed their time off, it would stop. Then they'd start speaking, and that time pick just so like. Of course, it didn't just take 2 hours. And then after the inevitable happened, which is the objection was nowhere near being upheld, the Senate would get up, walk back over to the House, and like, I get it. This is like 100. This is like 100 and something people or something like that. There's a lot of them. Buddy, how far apart are these two rooms that it takes them like 20 minutes to get from one to the other? Like, come on. I know most of you are old and can hardly walk. Like, there was one woman who was making a speech who I was expecting to drop dead at any given time. Can't remember who she was or where she was from, but like, she talked like a 90-year-old on oxygen, trying to speak around the mask. I'm just like, is this... Someone help this woman. She's struggling. And then they'd sit down, and then they'd go through it again. They had to go through it for all 50 states, and I think 5 of them were contested. I know Pennsylvania and Arizona. I believe Michigan was protested, objected to. I know Georgia was, and Utah or New Mexico, one of the two. Nevada, neither of the two. I'm just thinking of that square of 4. Nevada was also contested. Thankfully, Nevada, Michigan, Nevada and Michigan had either never been signed by a Senate member, or, like in the case of Georgia, the Senate member rescinded their support to the objection after, the terrorist thing happened. For context, that's what happened with Kelly Loeffler. Perdue was not on the floor. His term expired last Sunday. He was never going to be there because of the runoff. But Loeffler was appointed this position. She didn't get elected. I can't remember the circumstances because Trump loved appointing people, and he'd just kind of do it based on who would make the nicest promise to kiss his ass, and I guess Loeffler won, being one of the few women willing to make that promise. God help you, honey. So her term had not expired, despite her losing the election less than 24 hours before. But again, her term had not expired. So she was there, and she was planning to object, but without her support, she backed out. There were no senators from Georgia to support the objection, so they didn't do another 3 hours for Georgia, thank God. And then finally, at like 3:40 in the morning, an old black chaplain prayed the slowest prayer I have ever heard in my 29 years. And I grew up Christian. I grew up religious. I was very religious in high school. Embarrassingly so, honestly. Even if I was still devout, I'd consider myself embarrassingly religious in high school. I grabbed onto that like it was my lifeline. And it's not to say I'm not still spiritual. I still believe in something. Honestly, I still believe in God. I still believe in a lot of the true Christian values, but I kind of denounced the religion because, as it is today, it just doesn't represent what I believe is in the Bible. Because apparently the Christian thing to do is to support the Republican Party no matter what they're doing, because they also claim to be Christians, despite the fact that, the big Republican incited a riot, and a lot of the smaller Republicans were like, yeah, that's fine. I'm not going to go out and denounce that publicly. That might look bad. Trump might tweet mean things about me. I still want to run next election. And I need this rabid fan base to still like me then, so I can't talk bad about him now. Yeah, where's the hard Christian value in that? Because if I did stuff like that when I was a kid, I got told off. And if I'd given the speech Trump gave yesterday morning at that rally, I'd be in jail for inciting a riot. But that's neither here nor there. So yeah, I mean, so point being, I've heard a lot of praying over the years. Never have I heard one so full of accurate pronunciation. Buddy, look, you're black. I know you know how to pray. I'm sorry if that sounds bad, but I grew up Pentecostal, and that's close to the stereotype of black church. I put quotes around the wrong thing. That's close to the stereotype of black church that you see in like Medea and stuff. I know he knows how to pray. It was a very political prayer in that it took a long time to say very little. And with that over, finally, it was over. And, you know, for a few minutes, it was nice to sit there and understand that I had watched the hammer fall once and for all on Trump's first and hopefully only ever term as a politician in any form of government. And it was beautiful for a few minutes before I realized there's still 14 days where he can kind of do whatever the hell he wants, including pardoning himself, which he's floated the idea around. He has been for a long time, but the more he does, the more outrageous it seems. Which is weird, because it should be all the way at the top of outrageous from the very beginning when you think about it. The president having the ability to pardon himself? That's stupid. That's really, really stupid. It's bad enough he's getting all of his crook and crony friends off because they were loyal enough not to run their mouth. I imagine if he tries it... I was going to say I imagine if he tries it, the Senate would finally have to stand up. But frankly, I don't know when Warnock and Ossoff are getting sworn in, and I don't know that they'd have that. I don't think they think you need 2/3 majority and not just half of both the House and the Senate to do anything about the president. So I know that's what you need for the 25th Amendment. A majority of his cabinet and 2/3 of both the House and the Senate would need to vote to invoke it, where impeachment only needs half of the House and the Senate. So that's going around as well. And frankly, I think that's the better option, because if he's impeached and removed, he can never run for office, any office ever again. And that's what needs to happen. He needs to be never allowed to run for office. He needs to go to prison. It's what needs to happen. Let's not dance around the issue. He deserves to spend the rest of his life rotting away in prison. But at the very, very least, he needs to never be able to run for office again. But after that, I finally moved to the bed. I fell asleep sometime between 5 and 6 o'clock. I haven't even gotten to today's drama yet. So I'm laying there waking up. It's a little afternoon. And I've given up on laying there waking up, so I roll over. And then within minutes, either that or I dozed off, I hear my door open. And it's my dad for once. Nicholas, I need your help with something. And there's a bit of urgency to his voice that makes me think, oh God, what's happened? I'll admit, my first thought was he'd hurt himself. because we're both very prone to that. But it like that it was bad enough he needed help with it. Because look, if me and him are working on a project and one of us aren't bleeding, we didn't do it right. Okay, it was not done good. I remember we refloored my bathroom, the hallway outside my room, the kitchen, through the front entryway, including the laundry room right there, and the entire dining room. And Daddy fell in the kitchen vent 3 times before we got the flooring back down and the vent back over. And good night, sleep good. And I'm just leaving that in. It's Mom going to bed. Yeah, he fell in the kitchen vent 3 times. I nearly cut off my thumb with a jigsaw. Thankfully, it hit at an angle and ran up my hand instead. And just the staples from pulling up carpet in the dining room. I punctured my hands with so many old staples. I don't know how I didn't have tetanus. Probably because I'm vaccinated, actually. That's probably how I didn't end up with tetanus, but... So, like, if we're not bleeding, we didn't do it right. So I thought he'd got up, started some project, and hurt himself. Because I'll never forget the day, years and years ago, even before, all of this head stuff got bad. He was over at the shop doing something, cutting some little thing, and he just barely caught the tip of his thumb on the saw. And it wasn't a bad cut. Like, it's not like he's still missing a little chunk or anything, but it was a good enough split, and it had to be his thumb. It had to be the only finger on your hand with a pulse. It couldn't have been any of these, because, like, these wouldn't have... No, it had to be his thumb. Because he walked across the yard, which this is the... you've kind of seen my yard. It's not far, but it is when you're bleeding. Up to the house, because he was by himself, and his mom would have had a fit. Mima is not good with stuff like that. This was not long after Papa died. And she happened to not even be home. Wandered up here. I had to take him to the emergency room. He was good until about a minute and a half out of town. And then he was like, "Gonna pass out." And I'm like, "I can't carry you inside, so please don't." Because I don't trust Jenkins County to have a stretcher. Got him settled in. Got him comfortable. And by comfortable, I mean they had his thumb in a bowl. He was really fascinated at the fact that it was still bleeding and pulses. And I'm like, "Yeah, your thumb has a pulse." And he's like, "Okay, I know you were wanting to stay here until your mother gets here, but I need you to go home and clean up all of the blood before your grandmother gets back, or she will have a stroke and die." I was like, awesome. So I come home, and lo and behold, a lot like a nosebleed, it looked like he'd murdered a small animal. Just, again, like with my nosebleed, it kind of looked like I'd bled out, I don't know, a small animal. I kept putting animals in my mind, and I thought about having to bleed them, and it was not comfortable for me. But, maybe I really, really fucked up a gerbil. Maybe even that didn't feel good. No, didn't feel good. Anyway, he says something wrong with Coco, and I'm like, okay. He said she's bleeding. I'm like, great. So I go in there, and he's kind of mopping her up with a wet rag, which again is a great way to look like there's a lot more blood than there is. Spoiler alert, this is going to get a little gross, but whatever. And she's got a little, she has a lot of moles. I think it's a Cocker Spaniel thing. If not, it's definitely a Coco thing. She's just always had them. They've been looked at. They're not a problem. She just has moles. And she had something that looked like one that was swole up, about like that, and somehow she'd torn it from the side and it was bleeding. Um, it was too swollen up and everything to really get a good look at it, so we got her cleaned up. We shaved around it a little bit, and we put band-aids on it. We were going to put a big patch, but it wouldn't stick because it was sort of where her bare stomach was starting to end. We were just like, but Daddy'd been freaking out because he'd gotten a hunk of something out of it, and he thought like she'd split her gut somehow. Thankfully, it was not that. We looked it up, and what most likely happened is basically it's a type of blood blister. Blaze has had it in his ears before, where he's a short-eared dog, but they still flap. And when he was younger, he scratched him wrong or something, and basically it's 2 layers of tissue, but they're stuck together, and they'd worked apart, and the area had filled with blood. And I remember his ear was swollen up to the point where it stuck out to the side. That's the Yorkie poodle mix. And you know how you know how terriers are kind of supposed to. He's got his ears are supposed to fall, but like this one was kind of swollen up to the side. It reminded us of that, and so basically what it looks like is something similar happened, but it had just kind of kept catching blood and clotting up and catching more blood to the point where it had swollen enough that it had split. And we didn't really figure, and what he pulled out was basically a blood clot. We became more sure of this later when I was rebandaging it because it had come loose, and there was like a piece of it hanging off, and I could tell it wasn't covered up by skin, and I thought it was hair. I thought she's gotten an abscess and hair's growing in it. And it's been growing in it for who knows how long, and now it's catching blood, and that's what's going on. But like, I pulled it out, and this is where it's a little gross. And with a paper towel, I mashed it, and it was almost like a blueberry, if blueberries were blood clots. I smushed it open, and there was not much surface area to the odd black thing that it was, and it was just full of blood. So we looked it up. It's they call them blood blisters. They don't usually happen on the stomach, but still the pictures looked very similar. There was still what looked like to be kind of a clot in there, but it was covered up by pink, healthy skin. I could tell when I looked at it, so I didn't want to agitate it more. Basically, they said they usually go away in a few days. We're going to keep it covered, keep antibiotic cream on it, keep it clean, all that good stuff. Because honestly, I don't think a vet would do much more except take it off. If they'd even go that far, they'd probably just give us better materials to keep it covered up. But it's we've got it covered. She's not super active, so I'm not worried about her getting into anything. They're inside dogs, so it's not like she's out rolling around in the dirt for it to get infected. She walks a lot, but she doesn't wallow. Like she's, so again, I'm saying, I'm not worried about it getting infected, so we'll just keep an eye on it, keep it clean, keep it bandaged, and if it's not better in a few days, then yeah, of course. But it was a hell of a thing to wake up to, because, again, it doesn't take a lot of blood to look like a lot of blood. It really doesn't. I've donated blood a few times, and even just it filling that tube, I'm like, that's a lot of blood. Just like it's, and it's like, relatively it's not, but just any amount is a lot of blood. But then Mom had chicken and everything was great. And the rest of the day's just been kinda catching up on new information about yesterday and playing more Xenoblade. And when I'm done with this, that's what I'm going to do, play more Xenoblade. This is probably going to be nearly an hour long. I hope the camera's still recording. That's like as good a place as any to sign off. I'll catch you all tomorrow. Please still be recording. Please still be. Okay. It is an hour and 5 minutes. Jesus Christ.